Does the media actually think we're this stupid? That's a rhetorical question. We know what they think, but why are they always so obvious about it? Since the initial discovery of the coronavirus and all the mystery that followed thereafter, the question of where it originated has always been the end of the road for any speculation. The intermediary host theory has really been the only narrative given the okay by mainstream sources. It's only by accepting this line of thinking that you can avoid being labeled a conspiracy theorist or an otherwise off your rocker nut job. There are plenty of scientists and experts that have given their acknowledgement to other theories. They just aren't granted the platform to speak to the masses about it. One of the more popular theories, and the one that intrigues me the most, is the leak from the Wuhan lab. The problem is, if you give this theory any validity, you'll find yourself immediately admonished by counter-narratives which all stem from the idea that you can't be anti-China when it comes to this pandemic. It doesn't matter where it came from. Stop asking questions. China did nothing wrong, or some nonsense like that. What makes this theory so interesting is precisely the reaction it elicits. It triggers an emotional response, sometimes crazy emotional responses. People have found an identity in a lot of these news items, and they take it as a personal slight when you disagree with them. It's no longer just ideas and facts. It's literally some people's identity. We all know that the emotional appeal is the go-to method for controlling your mind. Much more effective than giving statistics or data. If you can find a way to dig down to someone's emotions and control it at that level, now you're doing real propaganda. The other thing that made the lab leak theory interesting is the sheer plausibility of it. While the counter narrative always quotes one expert or another saying this is highly unlikely or this has been proven false for this or that reason, there are just too many coincidences to just dismiss it offhand like they did so early. We had like no information on what was going on, but somehow they knew it definitely didn't leak from the lab. You got the proximity of the lab to the wet market. You got a history of people sounding the alarm about safety protocols that were not followed at this lab. You have the reality that they do deal with coronaviruses there. And we can really go on and on about the coincidences. But now CNN is actually giving air to the story. Or rather, they're giving the former CDC Director Robert Redfield the space to do it. But why? And why now? After all this time? It could be that they simply need the ratings boost, which obviously they need. Or maybe there is some actual validity to it and they're going to start covering it before they get left in the dust by other sources. Whatever their agenda is, it's honestly pretty interesting that they're entertaining it now. Now, 1 year after the outbreak. Thank you for your timely news, mainstream media. Thank you, CNN, for covering this. No one ever thought of this idea before. Just listen to the way they set up this package.
So Dr. Robert Redfield, the former CDC director, is speaking out for the first time, saying publicly where he believes the coronavirus that caused the pandemic came from. These extraordinary comments come in a new interview for a CNN documentary airing this weekend. Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us now. And Sanjay, Dr. Redfield says he's giving his opinion, but I have to say, I think you're about to break some pretty significant news here.
Sanjay Gupta breaking some news. Is he, though? This has been talked about since the beginning. And this is one of the channels that has been front and center in dismissing the theory just because who officials said it so. Because the CDC doesn't think that. And now you want to play it off like you're breaking news? Kindly fuck off with that.
If I was to guess, this virus started transmitting somewhere in September, October in Wuhan.
September, October.
That's my own view. It's an only opinion. I'm allowed to have opinions now. I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped. Other people don't believe that. That's fine. Science will eventually figure it out. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in a laboratory to infect a laboratory worker.
It is also not unusual for that type of research to be occurring in Wuhan. The city is a widely known center for viral studies in China, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which has experimented extensively with bat coronaviruses.
See, I could actually give CNN a little credit if they came out with this piece early on. The way he's talking about this theory makes you think that this was filmed a year ago or something. Like, this is a piece when we're first starting to compile information and look at theories. This isn't something you go to a year into the pandemic. But this just comes off like a parody when we're seeing a report like this right now. They keep flashing the death count, 500,000 plus up there. And now they want to talk about where it came from. A year ago, they were saying it doesn't matter where it came from. We still have to deal with it. It's a world issue. It's not anyone's fault except Trump's. Except Trump's. Nothing is anyone's fault except Trump. That's what I've learned on CNN.
Remarkable conversation I feel like we're having here, because you are the former CDC director, and you were the director at the time this was all happening.
For the first time, the former CDC director is stating publicly that he believes this pandemic started months earlier than we knew, and that it originated not at a wet market, but inside a lab in China.
These are two significant things to say, Dr. Redfield.
That's not implying any intentionality. It's my opinion. Right? But I am a virologist. I have spent my life in virology. I do not believe this somehow came from a bat to a human, and at that moment in time, the virus that came to the human became one of the most infectious viruses that we know in humanity for human-to-human transmission. Normally when a pathogen goes from a zoonotic to human, it takes a while for it to figure out how to become more and more efficient in human-to-human transmission. I just don't think this makes biological sense.
So in the lab, do you think that process of becoming more efficient was happening? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, let's just say I have coronavirus that I'm working on. Most of us in the lab, we're trying to grow a virus. We try to help make it grow better and better and better and better and better and better so we can do experiments and figure out about it. That's the way I put it together.
The real problem with this is, why was he not empowered to even discuss these ideas while he was working in the government on COVID-19? Our bureaucracy and the CDC are so political that we take cues directly from the World Health Organization. Our government is literally parroting CCP propaganda as if it were real information, real data. And we are expected to nod along and accept the facts that are given by hostile governments. We aren't even allowed to have a theory if it's damaging to the glorious CCP. And we can't have honest discourse about the facts because media outlets say it's racist or we don't need to know the origins. It was bullshit when they said it a year ago, and now they want to play it off like it never happened. We remember it happening. Because the same things Redfield is saying now are the same things people were saying all along. But the mainstream media simply dismissed it as fantasy. The thing to note is he didn't provide a lot of data in his theory. He's talking common sense stuff, and he's connecting the dots, and he's forming his opinion on that. That's something that'll get you kicked off Facebook or Twitter if you say the wrong thing. If it's not approved language from the CDC, see ya. Common sense is outlawed unless it's attached to an approved expert who agrees. Fact check everything, and if you don't say it exactly right, then it's 100% wrong. And we really have to get away from this idea that common sense doesn't belong in science. A lot of times science does cut against common sense when you study it closely. But this isn't a reason to just abandon common sense altogether. You are not allowed to look at scientific findings and use common sense to interpret it now. When every statement needs to be touted by an expert, this is when you know you're being lied to. This worshiping of experts just needs to end. And by no means do I worship Dr. Redfield or the CDC. In fact, I expect anything they say to be laced in politics, and I take it with a huge grain of salt. But it's curious that now that he's out of his role in the CDC, we finally hear what he thought. It is clear there was a massive manipulation going on with the message that was being given to Americans. Everything was politicized, still politicized, and it's run through the propaganda grinder. Dissenting thoughts were outright denied on their face, with no reasoning except the experts say. I still personally think that the lab leak is the most likely explanation. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but it will take more than thousands of random experts paraded in front of the screens, repeating the same narrative to convince me otherwise. I've heard from enough experts who think that it's the most likely scenario too. And the thing is, their arguments and their reasoning makes way more sense. The problem is in the messaging. Health communication is still about convincing the public of things. But we've gotten to this place where they don't think they should need to convince you of anything anymore. You're too dumb, and we don't have enough time to explain it. There's a raging pandemic out there, for God's sake. Just listen to us. Just believe us because we know, and we're here for you. That's not going to work anymore. We talk about ad hominem attacks as a logical fallacy, and this is basically the same idea in reverse. They're just using the logical fallacy of appealing to experts as their actual argument. They don't think they need to explain it any more than that. And the problem is that everybody has accepted the holiness of all the experts without questioning any of their claims. Now we're left with no paddle in the middle of the ocean. Nowhere to go. The only way we can figure out where we are is by listening to their reasons. Not just listening to their explanations and believing them wholesale. Listen to the reasoning behind it. Listen to the arguments. And make decisions based on that. The only problem with that is the establishment knows that they don't have the reasons for all this control. They don't have the argument to support the things that they've done. That's why they've used nothing but emotional appeals and logical fallacies to force you to make the decision they want you to make. And people need to start waking up to their bullshit. Or we are going to see more and more of our rights just start to fade away. And for more evidence that the lab leak theory is true, after these clips of the interview from Dr. Redfield came out, the media, seemingly in lockstep with the CCP, just piled on the headlines. Lab leak, least likely theory. The WHO thinks that it's not even worth going down that road. Just everything you see, everything that was out there after Redfield said this is basically just fact-checking him. China did nothing wrong, or some endless nonsense like that. Thank you for watching the video. Be sure to follow Exhibit Media and check out our other videos. Comment below what you think the most likely explanation is, or if you think COVID is real at all. All theories are welcome. That's how we get to the truth. This has been Exhibit Media, signing out.